So you'll hear us use the word integrated when we're talking about training models and our overall approach towards working with clients. And what that really means is not just addressing one piece of the equation. An example of that would be as if we were only addressing the muscular, the strength training side of this whole health and wellness continuum for our clients, all right? Obviously, it's going to be important, especially when it comes to making bodily change, but there's a lot of other issues. And the thing is these all work together. So the nice thing about the OPT model is that as we continue to learn a little bit more from chapter to chapter and module to module, you'll see how you can apply the same approach across different modalities, not only looking at strength training, but also our flexibility and mobility, moving from a base into more challenging and then up to higher levels of those things as well, right? People have progression even in flexibility and mobility training, looking at core strength and stability, also cardiorespiratory, balance, plyometrics, all these different styles of training. Not every single client is going to use all of them, especially in equal amounts, but just knowing that we can still take this overall structure and frame of the OPT model and apply it across the board to make sure that we really are hitting these different aspects of their health, their fitness, and for some people, their athleticism. So the OPT model, the optimum performance training model. Now, for a lot of us, just keep in mind as we continue to kind of introduce you to new things, wherever you are in your own training experience and life, we all come in with our own experience, right? So you may have an extensive experience in bodybuilding, in powerlifting, maybe in functional training, maybe you've mostly taken group classes. So that's great. I want you to be thinking about the things that you've done in the past, but also be open to these new styles of training and just know that as we keep going throughout this course and you consume a little bit more information on like really what is phase 1 stabilization endurance training, you know, what is hypertrophy training, what is power training, and some of the suggested ways of doing it inside of the NASM material and things that we give you, is you really got to start to experiment on yourself with all this stuff. Because the only way that you're going to be an amazing coach is if you know what it feels like, you know how things go together. All right, so just my undertone for moving forward is you really got to start to prioritize experimenting with some of these things, because I have no doubt, especially as we look at like phase 1, barely moving into phase 2, this is going to be a style of training most people are not really that familiar with. The mobility, the stability, the balance, all right? Probably because it doesn't sound the most sexy to a lot of us when it comes to trying to build muscle and drop body fat, but it is going to be the important stuff that allows us to do it for a long time while minimizing the risks of injury. Or if you guys are looking for performance as an athlete, it's also going to be the stuff that helps get those little extra gains in speed and power by really focusing on those foundational pieces. So the OPT model is broken up into 3 primary phases, right? We have stabilization, we have strength, and we have power. And you can see inside of the model, the strength side is broken up into 3 separate phases there as well. So we'll go through each of these, but in general, I want you to think about this as like a house, all right? Now, again, if you're like me, I've never built a house, but you understand the structure, building a foundation. So you want to look at this as a house. Although we have stair steps, right, where we're kind of working our way up, you want to build a really strong foundation. And a great example of this would be like, let's say you guys walk into the gym where you start working with a new client and you go right into doing some sort of power movement. Let's say maybe it's a dumbbell snatch, maybe you're doing some sort of barbell clean and press, all right, whatever environment you might be in. Now, initially, someone still might see some progress. Maybe they go from they haven't been doing anything else before, we go right to these more advanced levels of training. But at some point, one of 2 things is probably likely to happen. A, our progress and our results might stall out, right? We might see some beginner gains for a little while, but then pretty quickly it's going to start to level out. And that may be because we never really built the foundation to get the most out of that type of training. So we're really not optimally even getting the best results from what we're doing. And the second piece is as we move up this phases of stability, strength, into power, we also move up in risk inside of the gym. Oftentimes our exercises that are more power-based are going to be more explosive, which means there's more coordination, there's more control. And so the likelihood and the risk of injury potentially could go up as well. All right. And the nice thing about working through these phases in this sequence is that we're trying to build a stronger and stronger foundation of that house so that, hey, when an earthquake comes, call that an injury, call that getting knocked down, call that falling off a curb, whatever might happen in life, the likelihood of us getting injured is hopefully going to be lower. And the nice thing also is as I build a stronger, stable base, and then I build more muscular endurance, and then I build larger muscles, and then I build stronger muscles, is once I get to those power levels, if I do, because not every client has to get to power training based upon your approach, but by the time I do, I'm also going to get the absolute most power because my system, everything else further down in my training philosophy in this OPT model has helped prepare me to get more out of the next phase. So that's the idea. And you'll find inside of the material, there are some suggested time ranges that someone would spend as we periodize and we go through stabilization into muscular endurance, hypertrophy strength. But your role as a coach is going to be to know. Some people may need to spend more or less time. They might only need 3 weeks inside of more of a stabilization focus, while others might need 6 or 8 weeks. So it's really going to be up to you to see people master these levels and these exercises as they continue to move up. And the last thing I'll say on this slide is also that not every single thing in that day may perfectly have to fit that phase that they're in, okay? Now this will start to get into more of an undulating periodization approach down the road, but it just might be that the majority of the exercises you're doing still may be, let's say if you're into this strength phase, maybe you're in muscular endurance, they may be more muscular endurance based, but you still may have a few exercises that are hanging back and maintaining the gains and the progress that you've made in phase 1. So over the next couple of slides, we're gonna break each one of these down a little bit more individually into like, what are we actually trying to achieve and what does this look like inside the gym? So stabilization, phase 1 of the OPT model, really, we're just now pouring the concrete and we're laying the foundation for all of the progress that we want to set further down the road. Now inside of this stabilization level, our primary focus is going to be to get people moving better, all right? Because obviously if we can, let's say for example, get someone to get into a better position inside of the squat, that's going to allow them to get stronger and hopefully challenge the body, which regardless, whether someone is looking for body composition change, fat loss, strength gain, we need them to be able to challenge their body with intensity. But if they're not moving well, it's going to be hard to do so. So inside of this phase, we're not going to find a significant focus on load, meaning the overall weight that they're utilizing. Even if we were to look at, although you probably won't do that many 1 rep maxes with your clients, if we were looking at 1 rep max percentages, you're going to be staying like 40 to 60% of someone's 1 rep max because we're going to be doing slightly higher volume, meaning we're going to be doing slightly more repetitions and at a much slower tempo than most people are used to. So a couple of words that should stand out to you on this slide, not only from a test taking standpoint, but just from an understanding of what we're trying to achieve. First one is going to be optimum neuromuscular efficiency. So it sounds sexy, but it's like, what does that mean? Optimum neuromuscular efficiency. What this means is actually getting our body better at sending the right signals to the right muscles to create the right movements. So although for many of you guys are in this course because you already are avid lovers of exercise, squatting might not seem that complicated to you. You're just like, all right, let me sit my butt back and down, right? Pretty simple. Now, think about, maybe you played basketball, maybe you didn't. Think about something like a free throw. A little bit more coordination, there's a little routine to it, fluid motion that has to happen. For some people, neurologically, a squat could be like a free throw. If they've never done it before, it's like learning a new skill. And when you start to think about exercises that way, all of a sudden your approach towards how you load it, the speed at which you do it, all those things start to change. So optimum neuromuscular efficiency really just means, in layman's terms, training your neurological system to better communicate with your muscles so that we're sending the right signals and we're getting the most contraction of those muscles we're trying to use. In the squat, that means we are hinging at the hips first, all right? So that way when we get to the bottom or whatever depth they're achieving, we're engaging the glutes, putting those hips back, all right? Utilizing the quads, the hamstring, the glutes together, the coordination of the hip and the knee bend. It takes time for people. When you really start to break down what's happening in the body, you can start to see that each of these exercises is kind of like a skill. So how we achieve this, as you look inside the material, this is gonna be through much slower tempos, all right? Tempo has to refer to the speed of movement. So if you think about the average way that people approach the gym, I don't think a lot of people think that much about how fast they're moving. If anything, sometimes they're just trying to get it done with, right? So it's like, just go as fast as possible. But what we'll find is that stability and speed have an inverse relationship. The faster we move, the harder it is to stabilize. So when we have clients in this phase 1, and really honestly, as you have people working out in their first 3 to 6 months, the best thing you can do, slow it all down. Slow it all down. All right, and so even as you go through and coach, and we'll talk more about this, obviously we're going to coach and communicate how to squat, but we're going to make sure that they're squatting at the speed that we want. And if you look inside the NASM material, it seems a little crazy. This is really slow. Let's look at a push-up. So they give you a 4-2-1 tempo. That means 4 seconds down, which is like slow motion, 2-second pause, isometric contraction, 1 second concentric. And we'll get to more of those words as well. Those might be new terms for you, eccentric, isometric, concentric. But what it means is we're going much slower on the downward phase. We're pausing at the bottom and we're going back up at a normal speed. And the benefit of slowing these things down, especially in these first couple phases, because it'll translate even over into our endurance, our stabilization endurance phase, muscular endurance, is you literally just have more time. You've got more time for your body to process. Where is everything? Where is it at? Can I make corrections as I'm going down? What does it feel like? So we're really training that neurological system. And not to go too much more on this, but just to give you guys an example, there's a really great classic study that's been around, talked about for decades now. It's called the broomstick study. And what they did, and without getting too much into detail, they took 2 college-age group of men. Neither group had really worked out that much in the past. And they tested their bench press max, all right? And they said, okay, at the beginning of the research study, what's the max amount you can bench press? And then what they had one group do, what we call a progressive resistance training program, meaning that based upon their max, they did reps and sets that were percentages of that weight over an 8-week period of time. All right, very traditional way towards trying to increase strength. And as you would think, at the end, they had a significant improvement in their strength in that 1 rep max. Now the other group, they literally only trained, they still maxed with weight, found their max, and they trained with a broomstick. They trained with no weight. They trained with tempo, and they trained with isometrics. So some strategy in slow controlled contractions, isometric contractions, and then being more explosive. And they saw almost the same significant increases in their strength, which sounds crazy, but it just goes to show you that so much of someone's initial gains in strength are going to be neurological. Now, no doubt, early on in the program, people still may get sore. There still may be some hypertrophy, some strength happening because of the load. But just keep in mind, the best thing we can do is take our time when it comes to adding intensity, adding load. Because for a lot of people, there may be some real strong neurological challenges that their body's trying to adapt to. All right, so keeping in mind, that's going to be a primary focus. And that's probably a simplification of this optimum neuromuscular efficiency that you're going to see throughout some of the material. And what we'll find in this is the way that we progress this phase is another buzzword, proprioception. It's going to be a proprioceptively enriched environment. Now, what does that really mean? We'll continue to talk about what proprioception is, but our body is a master at bringing in information. All right, visually, you guys are bringing in information right now. For me, I'm standing. Without my brain thinking about it, my body's getting information about where my weight is, pressure on the ground, heat. We get all kinds of information all the time. And so inside of this phase, our goal is to utilize changes in position, changes in stability, to challenge our body, right? We want our body to get better at using and deciphering this information. Speed does that. That's one of the reasons that we slow everything down. Whether you're doing that perfect 4-2-1 tempo or you're just focused on slow eccentrics, isometrics, normal concentrics, that's going to help us because proprioceptively we've got time to get that information. And then over time, rather than just adding weight, we may change the position. Maybe instead of a bilateral squat, we start to do some more split stance lunges and those types of things because now my body's got to use more of that information. There's more of a challenge with my balance and stability. So that would be an example of proprioceptively enriched environment. Don't get confused. I know when I first started to go through this information in my mind, I thought maybe that means everything needs to be like a single leg balance exercise, which has its place as we get into the balance chapter, but it's going to be pretty hard to change people's bodies when that's all we're doing. So a proprioceptively rich environment just means playing with those positions, stabilization, still slowing things down and progressing people slowly throughout this first phase. And once you as a coach have determined that, hey, you know what, we've seen some pretty significant progress inside of this phase 1, inside of the stabilization phase, then it would be to move into our larger block. We've got these 3 separate sections inside of our strength phase of the OPT model. And the first of those is going to be strength endurance training. Now, this may start to look a little bit more like some of the training that you're most used to, especially from the strength training side of things, where we're starting to now focus on not just maintaining, because this phase definitely, especially this strength endurance phase, we're still trying to maintain some of the stabilization gains that we had before, but we are starting to challenge with a little bit more load and challenging our body to sustain that too. So first off, muscular endurance, this has to do with our ability to maintain a certain level of muscle contraction. So you'll find weight-wise here, again, we're going to be in this 40 to 60% of someone's 1 rep max, and we're going to be looking to decrease rest times. we're going to be looking to increase the amount of work someone can do over time. It's not going to be about just trying to add more load. Even if you look at the suggested repetitions, we're talking exercises where we're performing 12 to 20, in some cases even higher, 20 to 30 repetitions based on the exercise. So it's the ability to maintain that. And you'll find inside of this chapter, NASM does give you some good suggestions where you combine, and we start to do some supersets where you would combine, let's say, if we're just going back to using our squat example, we would combine some sort of weighted squat, more of a traditional strength move. Let's say in here, we love goblet squats. We coach a lot of front loading, as you'll find. And so we do goblet squats. Nice controlled tempo, all right? Not 4-2-1, but still maybe, 2 seconds down, normal speed, 2 seconds back up. And then we would go right into a slightly less stable version of that exercise. So to simplify, maybe it would be going from a goblet squat right into some sort of split stance exercise, because not only is that going to challenge our muscular endurance, but now that we're in that unstable position, it's going to continue to be more challenge on our balance, on our stability, on the proprioceptive elements that we were working on in our previous phase. So just keep in mind, as we do move from phase to phase, it's not like you just say bye-bye and we forget about the phase before that. We still increase, challenge in other areas. We sneak those things stabilization-wise into warm-ups. They just are not maybe the main priority in our training program, but they should still be there. So that'd be a great way that you could start to work that strength endurance, and we give you some examples of other ways to do that aside from just lower body and squatting. So that's the goal there. We're looking to increase that muscular endurance and challenge our body's ability to continue to recover. Call it creating like a muscular base for most people, all right? So hopefully by this point we've got them moving better, we've got them learning the exercises more in phase 1, moving into phase 2. Now we do start to have some actual muscular challenges, all right? The goal may not be total muscular overload, but you still may get some hypertrophy gains in here as well. It's really hard to say that you just hard stop, go from phase 1 to 2 to phase 3 to phase 4. Your overall focus does, but you're going to have some benefits happening from different ones. Now, the next phase inside of our strength phase, muscular hypertrophy, this is probably where more people are used to training. This is very much, let's call it the bodybuilder approach, where our goal here inside of hypertrophy is to actually gain larger muscle fibers. Now, don't mistake this with the fact even most of our clients who have body composition change goals, maybe they want to, you guys know the word, they want to lean out, they want to tone up. What that really means is muscle hypertrophy. We want to build larger muscle fibers, obviously within nutrition and the rest of our exercise program, also lose fat in the process, and that's going to make muscles show more, which is generally what people are referring to. But by doing this, we're going to focus on increasing volume. Now we really are trying to mechanically overload the muscles. So this is where, again, not only multi-joint compound movements, also more isolated type movements, right? Maybe someone who wants larger arms, different aesthetic goals. In this hypertrophy phase is where we're really going to see a lot of that happen. And at this point in time, it really will be more mechanical overload. So even from a general repetition scheme, you're going to find for a lot of people, this is going to be like 8 to 15 repetitions. We might start to add more sets as well, right? Instead of just like 2 or 3, we may be like 3 to 6 sets. And inside your material, you'll see a range, but that gives you a lot of opportunities to start to increase volume, which volume is really just the overall work that gets done in a session. All right. Now, although we always say as a coach and trainer, our goal is never to make people sore, all right, because then we just get into this bad habit of chasing soreness and maybe doing more than we should. But more often than not, as people enter into hypertrophy style training, we are going to have potentially some more soreness, all right, partially because we're doing more volume, and also because oftentimes we are re-emphasizing the different contraction types, which we'll talk about, but those eccentric contractions where we're slowly controlling the weight down, that's where we're going to get a lot of that muscle soreness, those delayed onset muscle soreness issues. So just knowing that as we transition people into that phase, that's going to be more of our goal, is really creating larger muscle fibers, and we do that by mechanically overloading the body. And then for some people, this may be based on their goals. They may not really have the desire, the aspiration, or the need to really get into strength and power. So you really may look at these first 3 phases as a cycle for some individuals where we are getting through our stabilization, our muscular endurance, hypertrophy, and then maybe we cycle back through that at some point in time, spending 3 to 6 weeks in each of those phases, which is nice because then we're really starting to recycle and build this super strong base and have a little bit of variation to our programming throughout the year. But moving into our next phase, actual max strength. So within our strength block, we have muscular endurance, we have hypertrophy, and then max strength. This is more actually, funny enough, going back to neurological recruitment, we're looking at overall creating as much strength as possible. And by building larger muscle fibers in the phase before that, hopefully we're setting ourselves up to get more out of that type of training. So here we're looking at moving heavy loads. All right, it may not be that fast. We always say tempo-wise, it's as fast as you can. But when you watch someone do a max squat or a max deadlift, it may not move that quick. But the goal is neurologically activating all the muscle fibers together at the same time. All right, so you'll find for this, we'll start to see the repetitions go down. Maybe our sets might still be high. We might be doing anywhere between 3 to 6, even more advanced training protocols, 10 sets. But you may be only doing 2 to 3 repetitions with a lot of rest time in between. Okay, so this is where we're really looking at increasing that strength. Now for individuals who either A, maybe they've got strength goals, powerlifting, or especially athletics, no doubt getting stronger has a huge benefit in just about every sport. And even for a lot of people though too, even injury preventative side of things, having some transition from hypertrophy into strength may still be a necessary part of a lot of people's programs. And the last thing I'll say about this inside of the strength block too is just knowing that the moment I go from 4 reps to 6 reps to 8 reps to 15 to 20, I don't magically go from one phase to the next, because a lot of it has to do with, am I doing single exercises? Am I doing supersets? Do I have a circuit of exercises? The overall impact is going to be everything together. But those repetition ranges that they give you inside of our OPT model, as we get into programming later on in the material, they are a great gauge to make sure as you're designing your programs that we are trying to achieve the right things. So we've talked a little bit about our previous phases of the OPT model. We broke down stabilization, right? Understanding this neurological recruitment, getting people moving better, challenging proprioception. Then we broke down the strength block, understanding muscular endurance, muscular hypertrophy, into maximal strength, where we're looking at greater overall recruitment of our neuromuscular system, and then into power. Now inside of our power phase, and sometimes this can actually be confusing for some people who are they're familiar with powerlifting. Powerlifting is actually max strength training. Power training is looking at not just moving the max load possible, but trying to move as quickly as possible. Okay, now this ends up happening with a slightly lighter load than what we do our max strength training with, because here we're looking at trying to increase recruitment of our muscle fibers as quick as possible. So for a lot of people, this may be where we start to see, let's say, things like broad jumps, vertical jumps, box jumps, really trying to trying to fire up the central nervous system and get our body moving as quick as possible. This is also where you'll find exercises like Olympic lifts, where we're trying to, again, difference between lifting a weight off the ground, a deadlift at a max strength level versus putting that overhead as quickly as possible. So for a lot of people, this may or may not be a phase that might be a huge priority in their program. But I think as we continue to go on, even in talking about different populations like working with active older adults, there's definitely still benefit of doing some power training. Think about it. For some individuals, getting up quickly off of a chair is a version of power training. It's really just our body's ability to recruit signal-wise from the brain to our muscles to contraction as quickly as possible. So in this phase, we will be looking at slightly lighter loads. You'll get some repetition ranges as far as volume and overall, just knowing that somewhere similar to our strength type training. And generally our power training is not going to be done for super high repetitions, because we are moving at really quick speeds. So our risk to reward ratio with these types of exercises in the gym is generally going to be more of a moderate level of repetitions. So in the beginning of this presentation, we talked about and referred to this healthcare continuum. And so this slide is just a great visual for you to understand, as we refer to this healthcare continuum, all the places and touch points that clients that you're working with, they might need along the way. All right, whether it is, from a medical emergency standpoint, working with hospitals, if it's a surgery standpoint, injury, rehabilitation standpoint, and just understanding where we fit into this. Now, I think beyond just the information that's on this slide, I think one of the biggest takeaways that you can start to think about now is, how do I start to build relationships with people who are in different sections of this continuum along the way? Because not only as we talk business and we talk training in later materials and chapters, it's going to be a great way to get clients and referral sources, but you always want to be a resource for your clients. So for you to have great individuals to be able to recommend and send your clients to, it's only going to help serve other aspects of their life, their health and fitness, that we're not really trained to help with. But overall, knowing we do play an essential part in this allied health continuum of clients' wellness. And another essential element of the previous slide and understanding this allied health continuum is to not only know what other people do, but it's also to know what we as personal trainers don't do. and this is referred to our scope of practice. And without a doubt, because we work together with chiropractors, with physical therapists, with doctors, there's always going to be crossover in things that we talk about, things that we do. But I think the best thing for you guys to do is have a great understanding of what it means to be a personal trainer and what we're really training you guys to do inside of this course. And it really is to work with healthy individuals to create change, behavioral change, physical change in their bodies. When it comes to even some of the assessment stuff that we talk about, it's not uncommon for a lot of fitness professionals, personal trainers, to go a little bit too far down one side and maybe overassume the amount of knowledge that we have in understanding injuries and understanding conditions. And it's challenging because a lot of times, if you're great at what you do, you're super knowledgeable, you're learning from all these different modalities, you want to help people. And so you want to be like, let me just do this one thing. All right, you know, someone's got an issue with their neck or their shoulder, like, let me just like dig in there with my thumbs, even though I'm not a massage therapist. Very easy to make those decisions, but I think it's just more valuable to understand that they probably need more people in their life anyways. You may only see them 2 or 3 hours in a week. They may only be able to afford seeing you 2 or 3 hours in a week, but they still might need help other days. And so I think the benefit of not approaching training from a scarcity mindset, but from an abundance mindset is that, you know, you're better off connecting them with other really great professionals in these other areas of the industry. And then you can just really focus on being great at what you do versus trying to solve all the problems for clients. We've all been there. I've definitely done it, and I know for myself I wasn't probably providing as great of service as they could have got from someone else anyways. And then you also just want to be thinking about your liability when it comes to scope of practice. You know, the massage piece would be a great example. We're not trained to be massage therapists. We're not really trained to manually manipulate our clients in that way. So God forbid you ever found yourself in an instance where someone was coming with a lawsuit or any other type of issue, you would find yourself in an unfortunate situation, because that's not going to be what you're certified and trained to do inside of this course or really inside of any personal training course. And it's also not going to be something that your insurance company is going to cover you for down the road. So it might seem silly and probably less likely to happen for most people, but always thinking about that risk management side of things, I think helps you understand where to stay inside of your scope of practice. And then outside of that, when it comes to NASM, gives you guys some more materials of just understanding the code of ethics for NASM and just overall guidelines as a personal trainer. There are going to be some things that you're going to want to abide by, not only documentation of the training that you work with clients on, and we've given you guys some forms to help you with that stuff as well, but also maintaining privacy with clients. This would be an area, again, very easy to kind of brush over, but I think if you really want to do this for a lifetime and consider yourself to be a true health and fitness professional, this is going to be the kind of stuff that you need to be thinking about, because it's going to set the stage for everything else further down the road.